The next talk we're going to hear is from another non-Neos team member. His name is Szymon Gregorczyk, and he works as a development team lead in Warsaw, Poland. And he told us that he wants to start the first Neos meetup outside the DACH region. The DACH region is Germany, Austria, Switzerland. So, Szymon, go, do it. Found the first Neos meetup in Warsaw. That would be so great. Do it. You have all our support.
Maybe a sprint while we're at it?
A sprint is always a good idea. I heard Jung von Matt, is interested in that. Zurich, Warsaw. We would love to see different places. Szymon mentioned that he's working on his own startup in his spare time. And he's thinking about rewriting that with Neos. So he probably has to tell us a little bit about that afterwards. But today he's going to talk about headless Neos and how that can support chatbots and voice assistants. So this headless thing seems to be a pattern we see recurring. I'm really excited about his talk. And Szymon Gregorczyk is going to talk to us about how to fix DialogFlow using Neos in your voice assistant. Enjoy.
Enjoy.
Hello Neos community and welcome in my living room in Warsaw. Before I will start, I would like to thank Neos team for giving me this opportunity to present during the NeosCon online. And I hope that the audio quality will be good enough and you will enjoy it. Okay, let's start. So, how to fix DialogFlow using Neos CMS? I need to admit that it's not broken, so that's a little bit overpromise. But we will see actually how to make more of it using Neos. So that will be a talk about voice, action on Google, and so on. My name is Szymon, and I'm technology director at 180 Heartbeats. That's a digital agency in Warsaw. Since 2012, we are part of Jung von Matt Group, and I want to believe that we have a strong digital competences, and I'm leading a technology team out there. So let's start with the voice background. Last year, the Google has introduced actions on Google in Polish market, so we were thinking what we can do with it, and we had this small idea to create a simple word chain game where the user is playing the word chain game with assistant. So he's saying one word and then assistant is responding with another one starting at the last letter of previous one. So very simple concept. And we were pretty surprised that it was very catchy and got pretty big traction because over 500,000 users, unique users, played it already, and they sent 18 million messages. So pretty nice. Later, last year, we used that experience to create Mobiliar Advent Calendar for Mobiliar brand. Together with JVM Tech from Zurich. And for that project, we used DialogFlow combined with Neos. And I think that was the background for this talk. But why should you even care about voice stuff? I don't know if you are familiar of Knight Rider show, which was on air in the 80s. And it was NBC show. So if you are not, then let's check a short video that I found on YouTube.
Alright, might as well put on some some music. All these weird gadgets, you think they'd give you a radio? What would you like to hear? What the hell was that? Do you wish further information on Silicon Valley? Hell no, I want to know who you are and how you're listening in. There's no reason for increased volume. I am scanning your interrogatives quite satisfactorily. I am the voice of Night Industry 2000's microprocessor. KITT for easy reference. KIT if you prefer. No, I don't prefer. And what's more, I don't intend to drive around in a car that talks back to me, so either Devin pulls your plug, or you get yourself another driver. I am not qualified to overrule your wishes. Well, that's real good to hear, Kit. Because I don't want to hear another peep out of you until I can get a call up to Devin's, so clam up. I'm going to listen to some good music, and don't offer any suggestions. I'll choose my own. As you wish, Mr. Knight. But since you are still recovering from your ordeal and I detect we're in a slightly irritable mood caused by fatigue, may I suggest you put the car in the auto cruise mode for safety's sake? No, you may not. And that's final. Good night. Good night. I can't believe this. A car that talks back to me.
Yeah. And now we are 38 years later, and I think that really more people can believe that cars talks. At least some of them can do it. And according to studies, only 2% of iPhone users have never used Siri, and only 4% of Android owners have never used OK Google. And if we will check how many devices out there are with voice capabilities, there are over 1.5 billion only from these two providers, and we have other companies too. So how does it work? Let's assume that we would like to create a kit inside Action on Google. So we would say, okay, Google, let's talk to Kit. Then Google will check if there's action like that, and we'll respond, sure, here's Kit. Then we have a welcome message from our action, and we can start interaction with it. In the background, it's more of something like that. So user is talking to actions on Google, and it's connecting to your own action using HTTP request and responses. We will show more details later about it, but let's start how to create a simple action. So first you need to log in to console actions google.com, and there's a nice button that you need to click. After that you are entering action name and the selecting market on which you would like to have your action in directory, but you will be able to change everything there later, so it's not a big deal. Then you are selecting something like a start kit for your action, selecting the category. I would recommend to select conversational because that's the default one for actions connected to DialogFlow. So at least that's the good start. Then inside Actions console, you need to enter a display name. That will be a name that will be used when you would like to call your action directly. You can of course select Google Assistant voice and so on, male, female, whatever you want. And yeah, I've mentioned that there's this name. In this case, it's Kit. And when we are talking, okay, Google, let's talk to Kit, we are using an explicit invocation. So we are telling directly to which application we would like to talk. You need to be aware that there are other options. So it's implicit invocation when we are saying, I would like to listen to some good music, for example, and in that case, Google will propose you something. or we can do some or use some built-in intents. Like I would like to play a game. I would like to play a Knight Rider theme song, and then Google will propose you some applications which are suitable for these built-in intents. So you need to be aware that on previous screen with selecting of these nice images by Google, you are selecting category, but with some categories, the other built-in intents are possible. So one time that would be, I would like to play a game, I would like to learn something, and so on. So when you have already created a simple action or something that will be your action, then you need to add really first action and create first intent. So something which is responsible for user's intention or is your response for user's intention. And you can, for example, select DialogFlow as one of fulfillment tool. And yeah, so let's first do short demo and let's check what we could create. So that's Action Console. I'm already logged in and I would like to test my Kit 2020. Yeah, I will switch test mode to phone. Actually, I won't be able to talk to it because my microphone is used by other application. So I will need to type in here, but first, okay, Google talk to Kit.
Let's get the test version of Kit.
Greetings, Michael Knight. How can I assist?
Alright, I would like to listen some music.
Understood. Here's something special for you. Knight Rider theme.
Okay, let's switch to show cars. And you see that here you can pretty much see the whole interface.
What do you think about that one?
And
Kit 2000.
yeah, Kit 2000 is pretty nice. And on the left you see the device with some nice emulator of your own action. On the right you can see the responses and requests that are being sent to your action, and you can play it with it directly here.
I can recommend.
And then check what was sent to
All
action.
systems go, Michael.
Michael Knight played by David Hasselhoff. The main character in Knight Rider. An operative of the Foundation for Law and Government FLAG, he works with the intelligent car KITT to fight crime.
Okay, so now everyone know who is Michael Knight and that he's riding this nice car Kit. And let's check what was our communication with our action with actions on Google. So that's the request example that we have received, and the response which was sent from DialogFlow. So in both cases it's just JSON. We can of course check here audio version of what's really was spoken by assistant. You may notice that it's not one-on-one, so we can and we should display something different and say something different. Maybe not literally, but give it sometimes more description. So here's my favorite. We are not saying it. Instead, we are on this playing some nice sound and then saying Michael Knight played by David Hasselhoff. Okay, let's go back to presentation. So, we saw some details, but let's check how exactly it's working. So user is saying, okay, Google, talk to Kit, and then it's going through the device to actions on Google, which is doing some natural language processing and so on. And we specify that our action is using DialogFlow as fulfillment. So it's sending info to DialogFlow to trigger welcome intent. So our intention is to welcome user. And it's responding with, hello, Michael Knight. What are we up to, for example? And I would like to listen some good music. So, yeah. Action on Google is transforming speech to text and then sending it to DialogFlow. DialogFlow is checking, okay, so now user intention is to listen to some music. So we are having a music intent, and it's sending it to either responding directly or sending it to some specified webhook if it's using own fulfillment. And then the response is being sent directly to actions on Google, which is doing text to speech. And here's something special for you. That's what we are hearing from our speaker. So I already mentioned DialogFlow, but didn't have opportunity to introduce it in more detail. So that's a nice tool for building voice and text-based conversational interfaces. And so that could be chatbots or assistants, anything which is related with conversation. And it was created by Speak to It company back in 6 years ago. And first it was called API AI, but then it was bought by Google, renamed to DialogFlow, and now it's part of Google Cloud Platform. And let's see in some more details what is intent, for example. So as I mentioned, intent is some kind of categorization of answers and everything which is related with one user intention. So for example, if I would like to listen to some music or get information about a car, that's two completely separate intentions. And DialogFlow, which is in this case, for example, our fulfillment platform, is responsible to finding the right answer for this intention. So, right answer for my request. And it's going through all intentions. So, in the demo, I showed that I would like to listen to some good music. That would be music intention. We can have car intention to show a random car, or for example, character intention or actor intention to show some information about the actor. And every time that we are doing it, or we want to find the right intention, DialogFlow is going through all of this stuff. So it needs to check training phrases, optionally some actions, and find the right response. So let's check what we need to set up when we are creating a new intention. Of course, there's a name, which is required one. We need to set training phrases. So these are the texts which it's expecting to listen to hear. So, for example, we can type here, I would like to listen to music, give me some music, play me some music, and so on. And it could be some examples of how you imagine that what will your user say when he would like to listen to music. Then there are action and parameters. So if you would like to listen to music from some special category, like for example country or techno music, you can define these categories as some kind of entities. So describing the music type, for example. And then it's going here. And finally, there are responses. So something which is response of your action to user intention. And by default, it's a text response. But as you may notice, we can specify Google Assistant responses, for example, as for our use case. And yeah, I will show that in details later. Optionally, you can select a fulfillment. So it's a webhook which will be responsible for sending response to DialogFlow. And yeah, I will talk about it later too, because that's pretty much important stuff. And at the top, I've skipped that there's a context and events. Events are giving you opportunity to just switch from one intention to another one. And context is important because it's showing you the context where the user is in his dialogue. So you can imagine that you will have many different intentions, and some of them will be inside other intentions. And you would like to pass parameters from one to the next one, and sometimes just clear them or remove them. And that's when the context is useful, because you would like to have some parameters only in one context. When you are going to buy a ticket, for example, it doesn't matter what type of music you wanted to listen. Okay, so let's go further. When we are when we are using the responses, what types of responses do we have? So one is there's simple response. That's just a text bubble. We had rich responses, which could be cart, media response, or browsing carousel, which is more like a list of items. And we had the visual selection, which are again list, and some kind of grid with teasers, what is called selection carousel. And for example, when we were using this media response, saying in our demo or playing the music, that's how it's defined. So we see that there's a first simple response, then we had media content with a nice image, some title, and link to an asset which was played, and the suggestion chips. And yeah, that's pretty much very easy to define it here, but I would say that there's one big but, because you may notice that the link to assets, you can't store them in DialogFlow. You need to store them somewhere. And as far as it's Google likes to believe that it's user friendly, it is for creating the whole conversation dialog if you are familiar with it, but let's assume that you need to give a client access to it, and that's where we can talk about some cons of this DialogFlow, because it's not as user-friendly as we would like to, or as we like in Neos. And for example, if you would like to give your client access to it, there is no possibility to have some kind of ACL, or just give client opportunity to edit the content and not change the whole dialog process. Or you just can't add multiple rich content elements like the one with teaser and so on, and return random one. For this, you should use external tools or external fulfillments. So, it's a useful tool, but not the great. And from my perspective, one of the biggest cons is that when user is changing the content inside DialogFlow, it needs to go through the Google approval process. So you may need to add one chip or one suggestion because clients wanted to add it quickly, and then you need to wait until Google will accept it. So it may happen fast, but may not. And one another con is it's not Neos, and we love Neos, of course. So just don't get me wrong, the tool is great. It supports many different platforms. So using DialogFlow, you can specify or create the dialog conversation on many different platforms using actions on Google, Facebook Messages, Kik, Telegram, Slack, Twitter, Skype, and so on. You can create it in one place and then use it in many different devices. So it could be cars, some home speaker, your phone, whatever it is possible, wherever you can play Google application. And it's really everywhere around the world. So I think it's supporting something around 20 languages right now. And you can use it wherever you want. So that's really a great tool. And combining with Neos, it could be even nicer, because we can change something like that to something like that with nice inline addition, which we all like. So Michael, where's Neos in it? So I think that you probably already know or have some idea that the natural place is somewhere here, where DialogFlow is sending a request to its fulfillment. So it could be here, it could be here. That really depends on what we are using Neos for in the project or in our scope. But why? Why should we use Neos? So from my experience, it's nice because it separates the content from DialogFlow by itself. So we can have DialogFlow tool to create the dialog, and then give someone else possibility to just enter the content, enter different teasers, text, and so on. So we can have it as a part of our website and use some policies to just set user rights to define or to edit some content, but not edit the other one. We can use our well-known content repository. It have great inline addition, and we can share content between services. So we don't need to create it manually. If we had some pages or some paragraphs describing something, and we would like to use it in our chatbot or in our voice assistant, why not use it And using it to edit content, we can really bypass DialogFlow limitations, like the one, for example, with approval process. And of course, we can use it because we can. So that's the nicest one. And yeah, that's example how it could look like. And I've created a simple demo site with responses for which we used for the demo and which you saw. So you see that we have here a context with some responses, and it's sending random response from one context. So for example, from business context or from personal context. And we have here a example of answer for Michael Knight. So if someone is asking for personal content and we would like to respond with Michael Knight, that's what will be sent. So it's simple response. Then we have media, or not media, but card response, and then link out suggestion. So just a link somewhere. Another thing which is pretty nice. Let's see how exactly what could be role of the neos here. So you may remember this diagram that I showed, that it could be in two places. And we have our action on Google. It's talking to DialogFlow, and then DialogFlow can send direct responses as it did in our demo with music, but it can talk to fulfillment. So some service which is responsible for sending you a response. Example fulfillment response is here. So it's just a part of JSON with title, subtitle, image, and button, for example. And you can really place neos up here. That depends on you if you will be sending this kind of response. I personally didn't like that approach because I didn't want it to have action or DialogFlow talking directly to neos. I wanted to have it somewhere in Google servers. So we use it as a content repository, which was just creating JSON files and all assets and sending packages to Firebase hosting. And we created additional simple application which was deployed on Firebase functions. So it's a part of serverless code which was talking to our which was just using some stuff that we deployed to hosting. And what voice content elements are we supporting? So you saw all these simple and rich responses which are possible, and currently our package is supporting all of those. So it's possible to send simple response, it's possible to send basic card to some links. Actually, link out is a link below, not like that one, that's the suggestion, but sometimes we can have, it's possible to just send a link. And media content like the one playing the music. At the moment we don't have these visual suggestions, but or visual selections, but that's just a matter of time and need if you need to add it. One cool stuff which I mentioned is that sending the response, it's possible to send something which is called SSML, and we are supporting it in Neos using the code editor. And when user will click it in inspector, just enter the text. So some nice markup. He will be able to define the audio response, like playing the sound, and then when should the action, so when should speaker make a break, for example, for 1 second, or how it should interpret some characters like kit, for example. Should it be kit or KITT? So that's pretty nice because you can show some text and read something different, which is one of best practices even. So it's not like showing yes and saying no. It would be wrong, and I think it could lead to blocking your application or to not approving it or even removing it from directory. But displaying the shorter version of your response and reading longer is one of the best practices. Okay, so let's check what's exactly Neos content response in this case. We have a nice response about Michael Knight, and at the top we have this simple response. Then we have card and, for example, link out. And you may notice that that's what we are sending from Neos. So it's random response is just a wrapper which is saying here's random content that we would like to display. Same is with daily content element. It's just a wrapper. Then we have simple response type with text, here's my favorite, and longer speech text, which will be reading this part in our case. Then we have image type, which is our equivalent to basic card with URL to image and so on. And yeah, text, longer text, and at the end we have a link out suggestion, which is, it looks slightly different than suggestions, and link out is linking outside of your action. Suggestion is just sending the text inside your action. So you can move to random car, but if there's suggestion, you can just click random car and it will be sent to DialogFlow to find a right intent. So let's check how it's done in Fusion, because that's probably something which is the most interesting for you. And in root Fusion we are using this rendering part and saying that if it's JSON, then we are sending HTTP message with voice body. Voice body is just rendering a voice content element or elements, because we may have multiple of them assigned to our context. Like, for example, we would like to send random message or random car description. Then one voice content element, or voice content elements are just a simple Neos Fusion case where we are either sending the default one, we are checking if we have node property with suffix data structure, and if it's there, it's responding with it. If not, then it's possible that it's a shared content, so the content that's being used somewhere on our website, for example, and we would like to send it from our application, from our assistant or chatbot. For example, a basic card response is something like that. So that's a data structure that we are sending in JSON response. So it's just normal image URI and then property value renderer, which is rendering just properties. So it's like sending a table or an array. And that are the details, how it's implemented with content element and default content element. So it's just mapping with property value renderer. Property value renderer is just rendering the properties. And the preview in CMS, so it's just part of AFX with displaying the all interesting properties, title, subtitle, text, and giving user possibility to edit it inline. So it's pretty simple actually, but it's such a much nicer experience than we had in DialogFlow, at least in my opinion. Okay, now let's check something maybe more interesting. Let's assume that we have some content on our website. So we have this nice voice modulator product inside our car, and there's Elon Musk quotation saying that, yeah, some people don't like change. And we are having it somewhere on our landing page or on our big product pages. And we would like to use it in our assistant. And example way to do that is using some content reference. So we have created something like website shared content reference, and then we can just reference to it and doing some fusion tricks, which I will show you on the next slide, I believe. You can have responses as here or here. So in that case, that's a quotation from here. It's just, I think it's a simple card, but without an image. And in that case, it's with image. And we are sending this product from, for example, from Magento platform API. So, let's check how it may look in Fusion. So we had this shared content element, and we are saying that it should use image type, one of these our types that we are sending from Neos. And again, it's using node type plus suffix to send it. So for example, if we have a Magento select product node type, and we are selecting one product from our integration with Magento, it's by default it will be displaying Magento select product command data structure, and we need to get the SKU number from our reference property. Oh, sorry. Actually, I think it's possible to do it simpler, probably. But that's just how it was done. And then we are reading product data from our helper, which is connecting to Magento API. It's possible to have some caches there and so on. And again, responding with type and just assigning the properties to our renderer. So to our example renderer. And if we would like to display CMS preview, so nice preview that I showed you on the previous slide, we are doing more or less the same, but we are just using different renderer, in this case AFX one. So as I mentioned, in our case we didn't want to connect directly from DialogFlow to Neos. we used Firebase hosting for it, and we have created a very simple module which was responsible for deploying packages of stuff to Firebase. Actually, that's the screenshot from Mobiliar project. So if users were changing something, we were just handling on publish slot signal, and then with every single change we created something like a static package of all JSON files using only these which were changed, and actually we were sending it to Git to have some kind of versioning of our content. And so every single publish was a new version, and then it was possible to just make it live or click here deploy button, and it was using this, it was downloading this latest tag from our Git repository and sending it to Firebase hosting. And thanks to that, we're able to not connect from fulfillment directly to Neos, which from one side could be some security aspect, from the other side you never know how. So you can expect that your action would be popular, or you would like to have to be it very popular, but you don't know it. And if it will have some peaks, like for example, Google will mention or feature your application somewhere, the peaks could be really huge. And that's the reason why we didn't want it to connect directly to Neos. We just wanted it to have somewhere in Google infrastructure, and don't worry about it. So let's talk a little bit about fulfillment. I've already mentioned that fulfillment is something which is between DialogFlow and Neos. And what exactly is fulfillment? Receiving from DialogFlow is a request, JSON request, with some information about the response ID and latest response ID and session and so on, context and other stuff, and mentioning intent which is being used, and it's sending it to your fulfillment. And your fulfillment will need to respond with JSON 2. For actions on Google, it have 10 seconds to send response, so it will wait for 10 seconds. And for others platforms, it's 5 seconds. So it's really plenty of time, but I don't think that you would like to give your users this opportunity to just wait 10 seconds until they will receive an answer. It's just wrong. We just want to have it as fluid as possible. So yeah, that's an example of response from Neos that we had. And here on the right is response that should be sent to DialogFlow, because the response sent to DialogFlow should have some specific format. And you may notice that it's really, really similar. So we have type simple response. Here's simple response key. Here is speech, text properties. In our case, it's text to speech, display to text, and so on. And type image should be sent as basic card. So actually, you can really do it directly from Neos. That depends on your needs and how you would like to prepare your infrastructure. In our case, we had this small fulfillment, which was just JavaScript Node.js application, which was sent to Google Functions or Firebase Functions, and this example fulfillment, what it needs to do is first you need to initiate DialogFlow object and initiate intent, so it's saying which handler should be used to send answer for specific intent. Then there's example content handler, so if it's responding to Neo's content intent, for example, that's what will be executed. So we are executing some content service, which is just loading data, for example, DE, category, context, JSON file from our Firebase hosting, and then doing a mapping. And mapping is something like that. So we are just reading content element type, and if it's matching specific type, we are responding with one of responses from DialogFlow or Action on Google library, which were included. So it's pretty simple, and yeah, I think it's pretty simple and powerful. And as I mentioned, we have implemented already simple response, audio response, so basic card, media one, and so on. And it's working pretty well. Okay, so I think it's time for some takeaways, and I think that I showed you that it's really good opportunity to come. So it's really, you can achieve something really nice when you are combining Neos and DialogFlow. And yeah, when we should use DialogFlow, or we should use it as a tool for preparing conversation for flow, so setting all these intents, entities, fulfillment, and so on. And I think that it's a CMS or content edition capabilities are not the best ones, or they are very simple ones. And if you have, you can use it as CMS if you have very simple responses. Responses are static. You don't need to manage assets. You don't need to manage some permissions, or you don't need to give it access to the client. And if you need to store assets, give access, it's better to use Neos as some kind of support tool, which could be either the whole fulfillment, so be just after the DialogFlow, or just a content repository, as in our case. And it's really great tool for some headless omnichannel CMS setup. So we can have a website, and that website, or use some multi-site capabilities of Neos, and prepare another site which will be just responses to Chatbot or to Action on Google, like in our example here. So it's really great idea to use Neos when you have a lot of content. You need more flexibility, so you need to respond with random responses. Either it will be random on Neos side or on fulfillment side. You need to use assets, and there are many assets that you need to manage, or you would like to give the client possibility to edit just only part of the content, not everything. You don't want someone to mess with the whole DialogFlow conversation flow, and so on. So and of course, if you need to be more independent, and if you add some one option, you don't want to give it or you don't want to give Google possibility to just decline your latest update. So of course, if you will change something in the flow, like create new intent or modify this intent, you will need to put it through the audit. But if you don't, you are just changing the content, why you would want to wait for it? Or it's just much better to edit it in CMS and click publish button or deploy it to some static hosting, for example. So let's talk shortly about next steps. From a current project perspective or this package perspective, what we can do next is implement more responses, so support all these visual selections, but that's pretty easy actually, and I think it could be done in a day or two or even faster. I think that it would, if you are using Neos as fulfillment, or actually as a content repository for external fulfillment, so like we did, it would be nice to use GraphQL instead of JSON. It's just using nicer technology, I think, and maybe it's more structured a little bit in the code. Of course, you can skip external fulfillment and just connect directly to Neos and modify it slightly, maybe to just send the right types of answers. But then you need to read what context you are in, what exactly you need to respond, what's intent, and so on. So it's just pretty convenient to leave it to DialogFlow library, which you can use in this fulfillment, and just use Neos as content repository, or at least it's simpler and faster. One of interesting next steps could be exploring DialogFlow API and see how we can integrate with it. So maybe we can manage intents directly from Neos and then just publish it from there, or these example training phrases, they could be edited from Neos. And that's really, I think that the possibilities are pretty much endless. That depends what are the possibilities of DialogFlow, and we just need to use here our imagination. And yeah, I would suggest one of the next steps could be creating Google Assistant for your website, because it's really nice. And I can imagine that every website where there's some kind of catalog of holidays or something like that, products, you can prepare very nice Google Assistant action for it. And that would be not very complex, so I can really encourage you to do it. Okay, some useful links if you would like to follow. You can visit, or you should actually visit documentation for Assistant and DialogFlow. It's pretty good as always in Google case, and you can learn really a lot of it. And here's some community love. So at the time of conference, the age 180 HB voice package should be already on GitHub, as well as example fulfillment. So I would be really glad if you can check it, play with it, and just give us a note later how you are using it, because it would be very interesting how you can use it. And thank you very much. I think that it went pretty well, and I hope that you liked it, and it was you could understood me. Good if you can, in case that you have any questions, just drop me a line on Slack, or I think that there will be some online session in NeosCon online. So yeah, we'll be there for you. Thanks, guys and girls, and take care.
And here we are again. Thank you very much to Szymon for his talk about DialogFlow and combining that with the headless Neos to provide even greater capabilities to voice assistants. So as far as I know, we do have Szymon on the line. First of all, I would like to say sorry for the little video issues we had there. The slide video just stopped, and we had to find the right spot to start it again. We will fix that for the recording that we'll post later. That is in sync. So yeah, can you hear us all right? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
That's awesome.
And we can hear you too.
Cool.
That's great.
The first question we got, you had on your slides AOG. What does it stand for?
Actions on Google.
Actions on Google. Okay. So that clarifies the first question that we had. Another question that I wanted to ask is, you showed a great example of using Neos together with a voice assistant, and in your specific case, Google Voice Assistant. Do you have experience with the other voice assistants out there, like Siri or Alexa?
Actually not, but I can imagine that if they are delivering some kind of platform for it where you can manage the whole conversation, you always will need to have some source of content or stuff like images, responses, and so on. So it's just case of integration it with this platform with Neos, for example, or other headless solution.
All right. So I have a kind of difficult question. The context in which I personally use voice assistants is, in my private home. The kids can easily interact with it, and they can listen to audiobooks and stuff like that. And with some advanced setups, you can even automate your home or something like that. And with one command, like saying "Good morning, Alexa" or Siri or Google or whatever, you can fire up a range of commands that give you some information, right? They could open up the blinders of your windows. They could give you the news of the day, the temperature forecast, or whatever. And I'm thinking of scenarios where that capability is brought into organizations, into enterprises, where when I come to the office, I can voice interact with the system that gives me information about my emails, my sales figures from yesterday, whatever. Are the voice assistants only private at the moment? So for private personal use, or do you see that going, accessing company information in the future?
So I think that amount of companies is increasing which are aware of this solution and how it could be used. Because from one side, it's of course super solution for private usage, like playing the music or something like that. I even need to admit that I've lost the opportunity of doing some kind of joke and saying, "Okay, Google, play something," for example, and then check what's happening on BBB on discussion, because someone has mentioned that it's actually worked. And speaking of other companies, I think that they are aware that it's possible to do something like checking my billing on stuff like that, but then it's integration of assistant technology with, for example, bank application, mobile application. So there are APIs for it, and I think that then solutions are slightly different than just managing the content.
All right. The example you showed was quite nice. Of course, we all love David Hasselhoff, right? And
Because we're German.
that was a nice comment, Dimitri. We saw that. And yet again, the whole technology is evolving very, very fast, and still there's some issues with it, right? In our preparation for the interview, we spoke a little bit about their capabilities of recognizing different people in households, but on the other side, there's reports where the recognition is much better for male voices than for female voices, for example. And
we talked about that a little bit, that there are studies that have shown that they're less well tested for women's voices. And so a lot of voice assistants have a harder time understanding and reacting to a woman's command than a male voice command. And then also when we talked about it, you mentioned dialect. So Germany being a very large region that speaks German with very, very many dialects and variations. But you can't do anything to combat that from your side, right? Because you have to rely on the understanding.
Yeah. You just need to rely on technology which is delivered for you by other companies. So as I mentioned during our pre-talk, that sometimes it's a little bit funny because someone is saying, hey, could you fix that? I'm saying that word and it's being recognized as something different. And you can only say, sorry, we can't really do anything about that. We can have impact on how it's being said by assistant, what tone of voice is being used, or what voice is it, female 1, female 2, male 1, male 2, and so on. But we don't have impact on how the technology is recognition, how is it working, and how it's recognizing the words said by the users.
Do you use a voice assistant a lot at home?
That depends on the solution. So it's nice for just, okay, Google, play something or run Spotify. Personally, I would like to use it in more projects where there is catalog of solutions or something like that. So right now we are just going on the website and going through holidays options, for example, or some companies have possibility of talking with a chatbot or just chatting with it. And it would be just nice to have it in a voice assistant and saying, okay, I would like to go to, for example, to Austria and hike some mountains and check what are the possibilities, where can I go, and so on. So I think that's really that we are really close from implementing this part in Neos, where you can have one content in your website, different multi-site installation for Chatbot or Google Assistant site, which is just managing the same content and delivering the same content for Google Assistant or another platform.
Mm-hmm. So the command center just let us know that there were a lot of positive comments about your talk on the big blue button chat.
Very, very well said,
yes,
Maya.
I'm practicing.
So, Szymon, thank you very, very much. Thank you for open sourcing your packages. We saw the GitHub links in your presentation. Again, sorry for the video thing. We will fix that for the recording. Thank you very much for your talk, for your time spent. It was great. Have a great evening. Thank you. And bye-bye, Szymon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.